About 7 decades ago, America's President General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the hero of World War II, had made an important pronouncement that America is a military-industrial complex. And in fact, America has grown from strength to strength as a military-industrial complex, which essentially implies that the politicians of America who are at the top of the pyramid engage very closely with the military on one side and the industry on the other, and produce platforms and weapon systems that allows America to maintain cutting-edge superiority over the world, at the same time provide weapons and platforms to friends and allies, but at a cost. Look at Ukraine. There has been repeated messaging that weapons and armaments that are being provided to Ukraine are running into billions. By one set of estimates, the figure now runs close to $15 billion. Now, this comes as special sanctions given by the US president in favor of providing money to the Ukrainian government to stand up to the Russian invasion. And the American Congress has been asked from time to time to enhance America's defense budgeting so that America can continue to support countries like Ukraine in their fight against authoritarian regimes like that of Russia, or maybe China tomorrow if China were to invade Taiwan. America's agenda, of course, on the face of it, is to preserve democracy. But underlying that is the fact that America wants top-end weapons to be sent to America's friends and allies, the NATO countries which have for long received American weapon systems are now being asked to provide all that to Ukraine, and huge amounts of anti-tank weapons, anti-aircraft weapon systems, machine guns, ammunition, medical field and base hospitals, and personal armaments that soldier wears and carries are all being provided to the Ukrainians. Now, this is not only helping the Ukrainians to resist the Russian attacks on the cities in particular, where the Ukrainian army apart, twice the number of that are the citizen soldiers who are standing up and defending the fall of Ukraine to Russian advances. But the money that America has been offering and sanctioning is being routed back to America's defense industry, which is always looking for more funds coming in to sell the weapon systems that are on a roll. They keep producing it, they keep looking for markets, whether in India or now in European countries, especially Ukraine. America has a historical record for that. More recently, in public memory, about 30 years ago, when America launched Gulf War I against Iraq and Saddam Hussein, America had expected the cost of the conflict to be about $70 billion. Eventually, the conflict cost close to $100 billion. By some conservative estimates, it might have gone to more. But records show that nearly 80% of that money was provided by the Saudis and the Kuwaitis, and a bit more by some other Gulf countries. So effectively, America fought the war to so-called protect the Gulf countries on the money of the Gulf sheikhs, who were terrified of authoritarian rulers like Saddam Hussein or Hafiz Assad of Syria, who is the father of the current Bashar Assad, or even Muammar Gaddafi of Libya, providing an alternate model to Arab people that there is another way of running their countries other than by the police state monarchies that Arab states are. America, in fact, made money out of Gulf War I. And two academics in the US wrote a book on Gulf War II and conservatively put the estimate of that conflict, talking about all the destruction it had inflicted and the money that went into rebuilding the states, etc., at $3 trillion. And that's big money. So therefore, the military-industrial complex not just produces weapons, it uses them to destroy societies. Like American platforms are being used by reckless Saudi pilots to destroy Yemen, where there's nothing left to destroy. And they make money out of it, like they did by selling those platforms to regimes in the Arab world, whether a post-war Iraq or using them in Afghanistan and leaving them worth billions and billions, some say 80 billion worth of military platforms were left behind by America when it scooted out of Afghanistan. So what's going to happen in Ukraine? There are many expectations that the war will end quickly, but it appears by all counts that the war would go on longer. Russia knows that the West does not have the appetite for a full-fledged military conflict on the ground. So the West is saying that we are keeping the NATO away so that the conflict won't expand. And the Russians are steadily moving into areas that they keep defining as their changing goals in battle. Most recently is to take the entire Donbas area on the eastern part of Ukraine. And as I had said at the start of the conflict, that it's most likely that Ukraine would be divided into two parts and Russia would settle for the eastern part of Ukraine, which is east of the Dnieper River, which cuts right through Ukraine. And they are now claiming to be heading to do just that. What is Ukraine going to do about it? Quite frankly, other than making noises, very little, but just holding on to its key cities. So why did Russia go into Ukraine? On the face of it, they argued to stop the expansion of NATO, and Russia really had a case over that because NATO countries had begun to dismiss their promises and arrangements that existed between them and the collapsing Soviet Union at the end of the Cold War. And even the Budapest Pact and the various memorandums that came out of it was something that NATO increasingly was not in a mood to honor. But the way Russia has shoddily implemented its military campaign has come as a surprise to a lot of people. Also, the fact that Russia has been unable to influence the course of the conflict in a way they thought it would run into a 2 or 3 week conflict, which is running into 3 months now and maybe more, has shown the limits of military equipment that even superpowers can use to influence decisions. Twice in recent memory, both in Afghanistan and in Ukraine, military superpowers have been unable to influence decisions on the ground just on the basis of the high-tech weapon system they have. But Russia has another financial agenda, and that is, as long as the conflict remains high and going full on, Russia will benefit from the prices of oil that are high worldwide. Though there are sanctions, but the sanctions aren't being enforced effectively to stop Russia from completely selling its oil and gas. And Russia is one of the largest producers of oil and gas in the world, certainly the biggest one outside of OPEC. Therefore, high prices of energy gives Russia that much of extra financial cushion to make money and pay off its debts, as it has taken huge loans to finance its growth and new projects. So it suits America to have the war going on longer and longer and pumping money on the face of it in support of Ukraine, but which gets siphoned off, as one eminent journalist at least wrote in the Economic Times, to say the announcement of $13.6 billion a month ago by the United States saw $13 billion go back into the American defense industry. And Russia wants the war to continue because it'll still make money out of selling oil and energy at prices that Russia had not envisaged. And most importantly, if Russia gets to control Ukraine, and it's unlikely Russia would be able to do that, but that was the earlier aim, then Russia would have been controlling a landmass which provides 30% of the world's grain and food resources and become the Saudi Arabia of the world in terms of grain and food resources, notwithstanding the minerals, rare earth, and uranium that is in abundance in Ukraine. Therefore, the war is about money, is about making profits out of conflict. Unfortunately, the people at the receiving end neither get the money nor the peace that they have always wanted.